Okay, here we go. On, ready whenever. That's kind of obnoxious. Let me move that down a little bit. Is that better? That's better. Okay, whenever. Just wait for the producer to say go. Or would he be the director? Or would he be both? Maybe he'd be both. Oh, we're good. Hey, we're live. Well, that's awesome. I'm glad you're here tonight. We had quite the change in weather today, didn't we? It was really nice when we got up this morning, and then all of a sudden it just decided to storm. So, hey, that's kind of cool. We'll take it. Well, we're going to be looking in Genesis 34 and 35. We'll see how far we can get tonight. It would be nice to finish up the story of Jacob, but we'll see how far we can get. Let's pray and get started. Thank you, Lord, for teaching us so much as we look in your word, how we want to hear from you. We want to be followers. We thank you, Lord. Amen. Well, here we are. We spent some time in Genesis 34 on Sunday, and we're going to kind of look back through it and get into Genesis 35 today, but let's make sure we remember the spot that Jacob is in. Remember that he ran away from Laban with his family and all his stuff, and Laban followed him, but God stopped Laban from hurting him. And they made a treaty that Jacob would not go back that direction again and put markers up. But in front of Jacob was Mount Seir and his brother Esau. And Jacob was so concerned about his brother Esau. He was scared of Laban, but he was even more scared of Esau. And so he did everything in his power to try to find a way to escape the clutches of Esau when God came to him and told him, all you really need to do is surrender to me. And we saw how he did wrestle with God and how he did surrender to God eventually. At least to some extent, he still tried to do what he could do. He obviously was still nervous about Esau. I was reminded as I was reading back through all that today and thinking about that again, about a story of Ulysses S. Grant when he was a general in the United States Army. He would go into battle, even when he was a lieutenant down in the Mexican-American War. When he would go into battle riding on his horse, he was calm. He was just so incredibly calm. And he called out his orders and he moved his men, and he was really effective because he was just so even-keeled. We got a job to do, we're going to do it. And it was like he couldn't get scared. And that was actually, that demeanor was one of the things that got him elected as president, was that it just seemed like no matter what was going on, this guy was even-keeled. And one of the reporters at the time had heard about this and even witnessed it himself and asked him during the Civil War, after a particularly harrowing battle, how is it that you can, have bullets whizzing by and cannons going off and horses being shot out from underneath people, and you're just so calm and so even-keeled? And Ulysses S. Grant told him, a number of years ago, I surrendered my life to the Lord. It belongs to Him entirely. If I die today, it's not because of a lucky shot by a rebel soldier. And if I live today, it's not because they missed me. It's entirely up to God whether I live or die. I don't have anything to worry about. And that's how he managed to be so even-keeled. And I'd like to say the same about Jacob, that he has surrendered his life to God. And so what can Esau do to him? What can Laban do to him? I mean, that's what Scripture tells us. What can man do to me? But Jacob had not learned that, at least not at this point. He was still very concerned. And so after he met Esau and found that God had already dealt with Esau in Esau's heart, and that Jacob was forgiven, and the two had a good relationship once again, he decided maybe he would not go see Esau right away, and he would stop for a rest. And so he put up a little encampment called Sukkoth, which means booths. You remember that he stopped. It was heading into winter, or it was in winter, and so he stopped and basically made some temporary barnyard provisions for his animals, and decided to build himself a house, which no other patriarch lived in a house. Matter of fact, Hebrews tells us they all lived in tents, but for this one period of time, he lived in a house. He seemed to want to settle down. But God had told him, go back to the land that you came from. Go back to your father's family, the land where you were born. And so you remember we talked about on Sunday how he kind of took a shortcut. And he didn't go back to his father's family in that land, but he did kind of get into the greater part of the land. It would be kind of like if you were from, say, Fairbanks. Sorry if you were from Fairbanks, but let's say you were from Fairbanks, and you had been venturing down in the deep south in America. You're in Alabama, Georgia, wherever. And God tells you it's time to go home to the place where you're from, the place where you were born. Fairbanks is a long way away. But you know what? I could go to Juneau. It's still Alaska, right? I mean, technically. And that's basically what he did. He crossed the river there at Sukkoth, and he ended up at Shechem. And if you look at chapter 33 in verse 18, it talks about that. And it says that he arrived safely or peacefully or something. The word there is the word shalom. He arrived with shalom, indicating that he felt that he had done what he was supposed to do and that God had got him home peacefully. Well, he wasn't really home. He really didn't follow even the vow that he had told God. You remember when he left home, he went to a place called Luz, and there God came and met with him, and God told him that he would receive the blessing and that God would watch over him on his journey. And Jacob says, if that happens, I will come back to this place and worship you at this place. Well, he hasn't, quite made it yet. But he wants to think he has. So maybe he's still tired. I'm not sure what it is, but he decided he was going to stay for a while. 33:19 tells us he purchased a section of the field where he had pitched his tent from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of silver. As far as we know, this is the only land that any Israelite purchased for himself other than the burial plot that Abraham bought. This is the only land that any of these Hebrews purchased before becoming the nation of Israel and being called back into the land hundreds of years later. He bought this piece of land for him to live on. I guess that's both a positive and a negative. He didn't go where God told him to go, but he did get back into the promised land and then try to make it his own. God had already given it to him, but yet he still tried to purchase it and make it his own. I don't think he's quite figured it out yet. I don't think that he's quite got it yet. But we see there in verse 20 of chapter 33 that he did set up an altar there and called it God, the God of Israel, El Elohim Israel. Now, it's good that he set up an altar there. He is worshiping God. That's great. He is also indicating that this particular God is the God of Israel, and even to a certain extent, that this particular God is in fact God. And he's doing this, I think, as much for the people of the land as he is himself, to separate him to somewhat. You worship all your pagan gods, but I worship the one true God. He is the God of Israel. He's making that statement. He's figuring it out to a certain extent. Except chapter 34. Now, we looked at this on Sunday, and it would be worth looking at it on Sunday because we're not going to dig in too deep at this point, and I don't want to rehash things we've already dealt with, but we do need to understand some things about chapter 34. First of all, Genesis chapter 34 has absolutely no mention of God in it. It's one of a very, very few Old Testament chapters at all. One of just a very small handful of chapters in the Old Testament that don't even mention God. In the book of Esther, some say God is not directly mentioned except by Mordecai one time, but you can at least see his hand at work in that book. Very clearly, it's presented that way, that you can see his hand at work. Here in chapter 34, it's just godless. There is no mention of God. There is no remembrance of God. There is no attempt to follow God. There is no submission to God. And we don't see any direct evidence of God working on behalf of Jacob and his family. It's just a godless chapter. Even Jacob comes across as godless. There's a comedian that I like to follow. His name is Mike Goodwin. He's hilarious. Hilarious. I recommend looking up Mike Goodwin. He always wears a shirt and a bow tie. He's a great guy, overtly Christian, does a lot of speaking in churches as well as in other places. He was talking about how one time he was doing some work down at the church, must be a bigger church that he's a part of, and the pastor had asked him to make some phone calls to connect with people about an event that was coming up that they had something to do with, and he gave him a list of people. And Mike knew some of these people, but he didn't know others, not personally, not very well. And there was one particular lady on the list. He knew who she was, but they had never really connected in a personal way, so he did not have her phone number, and he was pretty sure she didn't have his. So he dialed up the number there on the cell phone, and she didn't know who it was. She didn't have caller ID. He said, I did not realize that this lady was a part-time Christian, and I did not realize that this was her day off. And she answered the phone, who the blankety blank is this? And he said, this is Mike, from the church. And he said there was a brief silent pause. And then she said, well, brother, praise the Lord. It's so good to hear from you. I did not realize she was a part-time Christian, he said. It seems that Jacob, we've been struggling with Jacob, haven't we? We want Jacob to be a follower. That's what God called him to be way back in Bethel. Be a follower. He's not a follower. He's a believer. He believes, but he's not following. He's not walking in the footsteps of his God. He's not stepping out on faith. He's not surrendering all that he is. He is a believer, and he's kind of maybe a sometimes follower, a part-time follower. But we know you can't do that, can you? I mean, Jesus made that so clear. If anybody wants to be a follower, great. Deny yourself. Take up the cross and follow me. He called people to follow him. Leave it all behind. Leave your boats behind, your parents behind, your family behind, and follow me. Remember the rich young ruler who came and said, well, I want to follow you, but I also have all this wealth. He said, well, that's not going to work. Remember the guy who came and said, I will follow you just as soon as my dad kicks the bucket. He's not approving, so I'm going to wait. That's not going to work. You are a full-time follower. You're not a follower at all. And here we see Jacob trying to be a part-time follower and failing miserably. Now, we talked about the fact that Dinah here is a teenager. And we talked about the fact that it's perfectly normal for her to want to go see the people of the land. We didn't really talk about the perils that can come from that. We will tonight. But we did talk about the fact that she should not have been able to go see the people of the land without a male with her, without a male chaperone. Now, in the culture of that day, the brothers, her brothers, they were as responsible for her as her father. They were just as responsible to protect her and provide for her as was her father. They were responsible to make sure she had a chaperone. Best case, one of them would go. She had enough brothers. If one of them would not go, then they were responsible to assign a trusted servant to go with her. The reason was not because she could not be trusted or she couldn't take care of herself. The reason was she was young and innocent. And she was heading into a place where maybe the people aren't so well known and where she could be taken advantage of. And that's exactly what happened. Remember that Shechem is a Canaanite city. The specific group of people that are there, the clan, is called the Hivites. We come to find out they were pretty honorable people for pagans. I mean, they did not worship Almighty God. They absolutely purposefully rejected Yahweh God. They'd made that choice in their culture, and they had a number of false gods that they worshiped. But if we can deal with that, they were pretty fair and honest people. They just didn't do things the way that we do them. They didn't follow the customs that we, Jacob might say, as Hebrews ought to follow. But most importantly, they don't follow Yahweh God. Now, Dinah goes out, apparently without a chaperone. Maybe she went with some other girls. I don't know. She went out and she met some ladies of the land, as we learned about. And in my mind, she went to some event, maybe a dance or a banquet or something like that. And she saw this young man, Shechem. The town is named after him. He is the prince. He is wealthy. He is powerful. My guess is that he's probably in his 20s, could even be 30s. And remember, she's a teenager. She is smitten by him because we all know girls don't like boys, girls like cars and money. You remember the song? It's the truth. They like the power, they like the wealth, right? We all know this, right? If you doubt it, look at Kyle Busch. Funniest looking guy in all of NASCAR, and he has literally a supermodel for a wife. That's all I'm saying. She sees Shechem, and oh, he's so dashing. Well, apparently she was a hottie, and he liked her. And they spent some time together and got to know one another, and he liked her a whole lot. The text here says that he raped her there in verse 2. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, who was the region's chieftain, saw her, he took her and raped her. Now, we're going to see a similar but backwards incident happen with one of Jacob's sons, and that word is not used. He forced a woman to have sex with him, but he just slept with her. There's a little bit of a double standard going on here. It does not seem that Shechem took her and violently overpowered her and violated her will in this way. I'm not saying she was necessarily a fully willing participant. I would say probably a better term, based on the rest of the text, was that he had seduced her. He had, it tells us he spoke softly and kindly to her. He said loving things to her. He probably told her, I'm going to marry you. It's going to be great. And he took advantage of her. He took advantage of her innocence. He took advantage of the fact that she had no one protecting her. He took advantage of her. And it was wrong to do so, at least in the eyes of the Hebrew. I don't know if it was wrong for him to do that in the eyes of the Hivite clan, in the eyes of the Canaanites. Doesn't appear it was. He just had his way with her. He was infatuated with her, we're told in line 3. He loved her and spoke tenderly to her. And to his father he said, get me this girl as a wife. Remember that parents in this time still arranged marriages, and so the two dads are going to need to talk, and they're going to need to set this up. Also in the Hebrew culture, since the brothers are responsible to her as well, or responsible for her as well, that the young man is going to need to talk to the brothers. We saw that happen when the unnamed servant came to get Rebekah for Isaac. We saw that play out. In verse 5, we see that Jacob heard that Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah. But since his sons were with his livestock in the field, he remained silent until they returned. Come on, Dad, what would you do? What would you do? You'd want to do something. I don't know if Jacob is transferring the responsibility he has for his daughter to her brothers and saying, well, our brother's not here, we'll let them get here and we'll figure it out then. Or if he's just being passive and just being a wimp, or if he just doesn't care. I'm not sure what's going on here, but I do know that he handled it incorrectly. During that time, we don't know how Jacob found out, and I find that really interesting. Jacob might have found out about this through the network that was the chain of servants of wealthy people. Might have gotten back to him that way through the gossip train. He might have found out, Dinah might have come home and talked to her mom or sister or nurse or something that might have mentioned it, and it got to Jacob that way. Or it might be what we read here in verse 6, Shechem's father Hamor came to speak with Jacob. I mean, listen, these guys are pretty honorable. Jacob didn't have to go looking for Hamor and say, what did your son do? Hamor came and said, hey, we got a situation here and I have come to settle it. And they had a conversation. Sounds like they were having a pretty good conversation. They're probably having a big lunch when Jacob's sons returned from the field and they heard about the incident and they were deeply grieved and very angry. Wait a minute. If Dinah was that big of a deal to her, why did they let her go off unattended? They were responsible to see that she was chaperoned. What was so important that they couldn't take the time and dedicate the resources to see that their daughter, or their sister, who apparently now is very important, what was so important that they couldn't dedicate those resources? Well, they were out in the field. I mean, they had work to do. Apparently, work had become more important. That's an important lesson. As I see parents take their kids and drop them off the daycare center, leave them at school all day, especially teenagers, Hey, listen, I was a latchkey kid. I came home from school and let myself in the house, and I knew there were certain things I had to have done before my mom or dad got home, or I was going to be in deep trouble, so I made sure those things were done. I often cooked dinner. I often didn't see a parental figure until late in the evening. And if I had to be back at school for something, like an open house or a band event or something, I often wouldn't see them until late at night. And I turned out just great. No, I'm a bad example. That's not the way it ought to work. And this is what these guys did with their sister. They made something else more important than their responsibility to their own family. And it has come to get them. And they say Shechem had committed an outrage against Israel. This is what you and I were talking about. Shechem had committed an outrage against Israel. It's the first mention of the group of people as a clan of their own by name right here. Now, this is not one of those principles of first mention that we need to dig into. It's just the first time that Israel is noted to be a clan of people named Israel. And it's expected that it wasn't Jacob's sons who came up with that. But however, this was written down in the future. Remember, this story was told word for word. It was remembered word for word. And actually, Joseph was responsible for this story, who handed it on to his sons Manasseh, and Ephraim, who handed it on. Whether or not this was actually written down like on paper, as it were, vellum, or any other sort of writing before Moses is in doubt, we just don't know. But we do know that by then, at least, Moses and his crew wrote these down. And it was likely one of them who included that. And there's some reasons for that. And we're not going to spend a bunch of time on it tonight, but when we get into Exodus and Leviticus and the laws that were given to the nation of Israel, there are very specific laws about how we treat unmarried young ladies. There were not laws protecting young ladies before. I mean, there's some discussion about what a bride is worth in the Code of Hammurabi, and that's about as close as we get. There is nothing protecting a young lady. I mean, she has no say in society at that time. And if Shechem had just decided to take her for a wife and not been honorable, well, then he just would have taken her away. And what are they going to do about it? Just have all-out war is their only option. And nobody's going to do that. It's just a girl. There's a great story. Can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. A great story, biography that was written by a guy who his dad was a language professor, and he was one of the last native Aramaic-speaking people on the planet. There was a little group of Hebrews that had been deported during the Assyrian deportation, and they were deported down by a river, and they were kept safe there, and they just existed there for hundreds of years. And this guy was a native Aramaic speaker. He became a languages professor and taught languages, and has kind of kept Aramaic alive for us. We know the words Jesus used in Aramaic because this guy kept him alive. He had an older sister that was born back home in the Middle East, and when she was born, she was assigned to a nursemaid who kidnapped her, took her, didn't bring her back. And of course, this guy's dad, the granddad in the situation, the guy that was from that area, he wanted to go get her. And they said, it's just a thumb girl, is what they called her. Just a know-nothing little girl. It doesn't matter. No sense in extending expensive and special resources just to get a little baby girl back. I mean, that cultural concept just clung. God said, that's not good enough. And in Leviticus particularly, as well as in Numbers, we see it in Deuteronomy, there are some very specific laws about how young ladies who are unmarried are to be treated. And then once they are in the household of a husband, there are also laws about how that husband has to watch out for her and take care of her. God was not going to let them be overlooked. And that's what this copyist is putting in here when he writes this down, the editor who wrote this down. He said this was an outrage. It was an outrage against our people for him to just take a young lady and basically take possession of her. That's not acceptable, and something needs to be done about it. Well, here's what they determined to do about it. In verse 6, Hamor said to Jacob's sons, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give him as a wife. Intermarry with us. Give your daughters to us and take our daughters for yourselves. Live with us. The land is before you. Settle here, move about, and acquire property in it. In other words, let's become one group. Let's become one people group. This small clan of Hivites that were based in this land of Shechem, and this small clan of Hebrews, let's become one people. And actually, Hamor is being pretty wise. During this time, there were a lot of groups that were coming together and creating some mighty empires. You've heard of the Hittite Empire that existed to the north of them and was a result of tremendous alliances. Much of the Egyptian Empire was a result of tremendous alliances. And he was like, listen, we're going to be overrun. We're going to be taken down one day if all the Canaanites stay these individual little tribes, which they did, and they did get overrun. We'll read about that in 400 years. Literally, 450, 460 years from now that happens. He said, we need to be stronger, and these Israelites, hey, there are 11 strapping young boys here. And they're well trained and they know what to do. Plus all of the servants of the household of Jacob. Remember, he was very wealthy. If we combine with this clan, we can be, both of us, much more strong and powerful. On our own, we're small. But together, we're strong. You've got 11 sons that need wives. And hey, look at all these girls we've got. We can make an alliance here. We can become one people. That's good thinking. That's really good thinking. Unless you're a Hebrew. Unless you're one who has crossed over. Unless you're one who has been called out, called by God to not be a citizen of this world, but a citizen of another place. This is why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Or what fellowship does light have with darkness? Or what agreement does Christ have with Belial? What does a believer and an unbeliever have in common? Now, this is a phrase that's often applied specifically to marriages, or maybe even more specifically to young people who want to date non-Christians. We use this argument, and that's fine. Fits. It fits. But Paul's application is much larger than that. He was calling the Corinthian people. The Corinthian city was the most worldly city on the planet. Matter of fact, there was a verb, to Corinthianize, which we might say to party hardy. To Corinthianize, to be a carouser, to be incredibly loose with morals and take advantage of anything and anyone that you could. To Corinthianize. Well, he was calling people who came from that background to separate themselves from the things of the world. Don't be in business with the people of the world. Don't be accepting the education of the people of the world. Be completely separated. Don't be raising your children in the world. Don't be getting spiritual and psychological assistance from the people of the world. Any of that co-leaning. He uses this term, yoked together. That's where you take two animals and you have a device made out of wood and leather and metal that hooks the two animals together so that they have the same, they can basically double power. If you got one horse, you got 1 horsepower. You got 2 horsepower. Kind of a concept. Now, when they would yoke animals together, the person who did the work of yoking those animals together would choose 2 animals that were very equally matched. Not just physically, but even in their temperament, so that they weren't fighting with one another, but so that they could work together, so they could pull the same. You certainly wouldn't put a strong horse with a little donkey. I mean, they wouldn't be able to pull together. It would hurt both of them. It would kill both of them, given enough time. You got 2 animals that were the same to work together. And if you've got big animals and little animals, you've got 2 big animals and 2 little animals. You don't mess with that. Paul says to develop a partnership, a close partnership where you're dependent on each other with someone who is a citizen of this world. Well, it's going to hurt you both. He doesn't tell us not to associate with people of the world entirely. Matter of fact, he tells us, I wrote you a letter not to associate with sexually immoral people. I didn't mean the immoral people of this world. Otherwise, you'd have to leave this world. God says, remove the evil people from among you, those who are in close association with you. Yet don't try to be tied to them. Boy, we have a lot of problems when we do that. We've been talking about that on Sunday mornings before church. When we try to link what the Bible says about itself and about matters, we've been dealing specifically with matters of creation. When we try to, the creation account in the Bible, when we try to link those with what we hear in academic circles, non-Christian academic circles, we get the weirdest stuff. Stuff that neither the atheists will believe and stuff that solid Bible-believing Christians can't stomach. But we say, oh no, this is fine. We've managed to blend these things together. You know, concepts of evolution and creation, we've blended them together. You can't. They don't mix. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You would be better to mix oil and water. It doesn't work. Paul says, don't even try that. Don't even try that. So, this is what Shechem offers to Jacob. Before Jacob has a chance to answer, I wonder what Jacob would have said. I wonder if he really would have messed things up. You know what I think's going on here? I think this is one of those very early times when the adversary, the deceiver, Satan, when he says, I've got to do something to stop the promise. I've got to pollute the holy people, the people that God has called out. Well, he'd been working hard on Jacob his whole life, and somehow God is still protecting the promise. Hey, here's a good idea. This is a good idea, too. This is actually a good, solid idea. Let's do this. I wonder if Jacob would have gone for it. But before he had a chance to answer, Jacob's sons answered Hamor deceitfully. We talked about that on Sunday. Where do you suppose they learned how to do that? They answered him deceitfully because he had defiled their sister Dinah. Oh, we can't do this thing, they said to him. Well, that's right, they can't do this thing, but why not? Well, because you're uncircumcised. You see, we can't do this. We will agree with you on this condition only if your males are circumcised as we are. Then we will become one people. But if you're not going to do that, well, then we'll take our daughter and go. Why were they circumcised? Well, this was something that God had said to do. And the reason God had said to do this was because it was a physical reminder of the fact that they were different. The fact that they lived as a promise people. That was why. There were other groups that practiced circumcision for other religious reasons. For this group, it was to remind them that they were people of the promise, a special group. Jacob's sons are heavily misusing this. They're taking this special religious rite and misusing it and saying, well, you know, you got to be like us, and this is what we are. This is when the young lady says to the young man, well, no, I can't go out on dates with you because you're not a Christian. You have to be a Christian to go on dates with me, so come to youth group. So young man comes to youth group and maybe even Sunday morning service. And they start dating. Oh, but yes, Mom, he is a Christian, see? He comes to church. Nope. He ain't even a believer, much less a follower. He's just using this religious rite to get what he wants. This is actually what is suggested by Jacob's sons. Now, there are 11 sons. I don't know how many of them cooked up this idea, but I know that 2 of them saw an end. Again, we see that Hamor and Shechem are honorable people. They immediately say, oh, I wanted to go back to one thing. Verse 11, Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, grant me this favor and I'll give you whatever you say. Demand of me a high compensation and a gift, and I'll give you whatever you ask of me. A high compensation. Remember, there is a bride price involved. The bride price is not how much the girl is worth, like buying a slave. It's really her value to the family. Remember, girls did a lot of jobs then. They didn't just sit at home. Remember that Rachel was a shepherdess. I mean, they had value in the family. And if this girl leaves the family, somebody's going to have to take her spot. What's that worth to you? I'll pay for it. I'll compensate you. A high price. She's worth so much to me that if she was in my family and leaving, boy, we'd really have to pay up. I'll pay a high price for her. And a gift. The gift would be what was given to her as a dowry, the finances that are set aside. We talked about that before, how Laban had wasted that dowry. This is money that's given to her, that is hers to keep as almost like her investment. Often it also includes a gift to the mother of the girl and can include a gift to the brothers of the girl. Remember when Rebekah was settling that up, or when Laban was settling that up, and they saw all of the gold and jewels this guy brought. And that's the bride price. He is being, Shechem is doing everything he can to be honorable. Interestingly enough, this too is a matter that's settled in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. That price is fixed. If a girl is taken advantage of in any way, a virgin girl is taken advantage of in any way by a guy, he is required to pay the bride price of 50 shekels of silver. Now, you might not think that that's much, but remember, Jacob bought a spread big enough for an entire ranch, big enough for him to live on with all of his thousands of flocks and herds and hundreds of servants and family members for 100 shekels of silver. Remember that Jesus was betrayed for 30. God said, if you're going to mess with that, it's a high price. It maximizes at 50 shekels of silver. Interesting. Well, the men, Hamor and Shechem, now had to sell this concept of circumcision to the other men of the city. And the way they sold it is basically by saying, yeah, this is really going to hurt. But look at the value. These men and all of their belongings will become part of our clan. Our wealth will significantly more than double overnight. And we'll have the safety and security of having this clan around us. And look, they're such good people. Look at what they're willing to do for us. It's just this one small thing. Well, all of the men of the city, of course, agree to do that because of the economy involved. And that's another interesting thing. You know, during the Cold War, the United States made a number of alliances. I mean, the world was really aligned. Did you know that's where the concept a third world country comes from? A third world country doesn't mean, oh, they're so far behind, it's like being in another world. It's an American concept. There was the alliances of the first world, which were the American alliances. The alliances of the second world, which were the Soviet or communist alliances. And they said anybody else is the third world. They're not part of one of these alliances, they're the third world. It's what a group of Americans had said. The United States made a number of alliances, including SEATO, the Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, in 1954. This was an organization that was designed to keep communism from spreading in Southeast Asia, and this is the reason we went to war in Korea and Vietnam. Well, it's actually at the end of the tail end of the Korean War, and Vietnam. It didn't work. It cost America tremendously. It didn't work. Then there was the Baghdad Pact, CENTO, the Central Treaty Organization, aimed to protect the Middle East from Soviet influences. It didn't work. It cost a lot. It's still costing today. And it didn't work. Also, you might know that the U.S. made a number of alliances with authoritarian regimes. I mean, weren't we trying to stop those from happening? But it made sense to make alliances with regimes that were like, Latin American dictatorships. Like in Nicaragua and stuff. How'd that work out? Not well. Some of those alliances still exist today. Some of those countries are completely dependent on the USA for their defense and even for their economy. It didn't work out well then, and it just tends not to. Now, am I saying alliances and agreements are bad? No. Don't be unequally yoked. You can't make an alliance with someone that does not have the same ideals that you have and expect it to work out. And that's what these men are trying to do. Oh, okay, we'll practice your religion for a few days. It didn't work for them. It cost them dearly. Because you see, Simeon and Levi knew that the third day after an adult man being circumcised was the worst day. They knew that with the medicine and tools that they had available at that time, that these men who were circumcised would get a fever. And this fever would be pretty debilitating. And the purpose of the fever would be the body fending off the infection that would come otherwise. Most of them would heal fine. Most of them would be strong afterwards. You know, it's going to take a month, but the fever would be at its worst on the third day. They would be completely unable to defend themselves. They would have no energy physically. Some of them would even be delirious in fever on the third day. And so Simeon and Levi waited for that to happen. And on the third day, when they were still in pain, we're told these were Dinah's brothers. There were actually 4 brothers of Dinah. These are Leah's sons with Jacob. But these 2 apparently felt special responsibility for her. I wonder if they were the ones who were tasked with keeping her safe, and they failed. So, on that third day, they took their swords into the unsuspecting city. Remember, they just made a treaty. They made an alliance just now. During these days of healing, the people of that city are trusting Jacob and his family for defense. But instead of being their defense, they came in and wiped them out. They started by killing Hamor and Shechem and taking Dinah. And then they killed every other male in the city. In verse 27, we see that Jacob's other sons, they joined in too. Now, some of them were pretty little still. Joseph at this point is maybe 6 years old, we're thinking. He would have been too little. Some of the others could have been young. But the bigger ones, hey, there's an opportunity for spoil. And they sacked the city. They killed every male. They took all of the stuff, including the women. They took all of the wives and girls and children for themselves. I just want to point out, once again, only because of the tremendous grace of God. Okay, listen, what Shechem did, I mean, that ain't great, all right? That ain't great. What he did was wrong, at least by the standards of Jacob's people, at least by the Hebrew standards, that's wrong. At least by the Israelite standards and by our standards. As a nation that has based its legal system, at least at some point, on Christianity, taking a girl, especially a teenager, when he's probably easily could have been in his 30s, taking a girl, and an innocent girl who didn't know better, and seducing her in this way, that was wrong by our standards. I don't know if it was wrong by his standards, but I do know that he was honorable in his response, that he had enough honor that he was willing to make it right. The actions of Jacob's family are horrendous, are absolutely godless. I mean, they're animal level horrendous. I mean, listen, if he would have taken Dinah and violated her and not released her and not tried to make it right, then, according to both the laws of the pagans and the laws of the Hebrews, they had a right to go to war to rescue her. But he didn't. He was willing to make an expensive pact, and they just outright violated it. I mean, they are vile people, this group. And we're going to see in Genesis 49 that Jacob realizes this about his boys. Horrendous. And yet somehow, God still uses them. There are 2 major learnings, in my mind, from Jacob's life. At least this study that we've done this time. 2 major learnings. First of all, we are a dysfunctional group of people. We come from dysfunctional families. I mean, we are full of dysfunction. And if you give it a minute, we'll mess up our own families too. We are dysfunctional people. And yet we serve the most functional God. He can take whatever mess and make something beautiful out of it when His people surrender to Him. That's one thing that I see in Jacob's life right there. The other thing we've been talking about all along, don't be a believer, be a follower. Be a follower. What's the difference between, class, what's the difference between a believer and a follower? Do you remember? Ty's thinking, he's like, it's on the tip of my tongue. What's the difference? Surrender. Exactly. That's the difference between a believer and a follower. Surrender. Surrender. If Jacob had been a follower all along, if Jacob's boys had seen him being a follower and not a deceiver, do you think they would have responded this way? I'm not saying they would have been perfect. I'm not saying they would have been good boys. But do you think they would have responded this way if they would have seen him being a follower? I do not. And I believe I have scriptural precedent for that we're going to see just a minute in chapter 35. They had seen Jacob totter on the side of the world and on the side of God, back and forth, and they were just able to make their choice. Oh, it's so irritating to me when people come along and say, I don't know what happened to that girl. I raised her right. I don't know what happened to that girl. I know what happened to that girl. You left her in the world. You took her to the world. You yourself teetered back and forth between the world and heaven. And you not only let her be involved in the world, you pushed her that direction. I know what happened to her. Oh, I'm not saying, listen, there are some times when good, godly people do their best to raise good, godly children, and those good, godly children still have to figure it out on their own. I understand that happens. It happens all the time. And so often these good, godly people who raise children that walk away do come back. The majority of the time they're doing. How we cling to Proverbs 22:6. You know what that says? Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. How we cling to that. And it is the case, and I've seen it over and over again. My good friend Gary likes to tell the story of some people that were good, solid, Christian, surrendered followers, church people that he went to church with. And they raised a daughter who got involved in pornography and horrendous things. And for about 6 years, she was in that lifestyle. And they were at a prayer meeting one night, Gary and his wife and this couple and some other people. And Gary just got on his heart that they needed to be praying for that girl right now. Now, they prayed for every prayer meeting, but he's like, no, we need to pray special right now. And they started praying, and they prayed their hardest. And wouldn't you know it, that night she called her parents, can I come home? They come back around. And it's because of what it means to train up. Do you know what that word train up means? It's a Hebrew word, the word hanak. I can't say it right because I'm having a phlegm in my throat, but basically hanak is the Hebrew word. And the word originated this way. When they had a baby that would not nurse, that would not take nourishment from his mother, that would not suck, what they would do is they would take this really sweet mixture that started with honey, and they would spread it on the baby's lips, and the baby would lick it. That's good. You know, children have a much higher sensitivity and desire for sweet things, which is why as a kid you could eat all that candy, and now, I mean, one Reese's and you're like, hey, I'm good. I used to be able to down Mountain Dew, a couple sips, I'm good. That sweetness, oh, they want that sweetness. That's good, and they'll start sucking. Perfect. They rarely lost a baby to that problem because of hanak. Train that baby. Give that baby something to suck on. Keep that baby's interest in this thing. Hanak. That term hanak went on and grew and became a lot of other concepts that I may or may not be able to find because I don't know if I have my notes. Oh, there they are. It had to do with helping a child become experienced and helping a child learn to submit. Learn to do what you tell them to do. Learn to not have their way all the time. Learn to not be so egocentric. like children are born being. Hanak. Did you know that if a kid sleeps 8 hours a day, he'll be awake 16 hours a day? And if he is awake 16 hours a day for 365 days out of 18 years, it'll be 6,570 days, which is 1,120 waking hours by the time they're 18. 1,120 waking hours. The average child spends 6 hours a day at school, or at least in education, for 180 days a year. That's 1,080 hours per school year for 13 years, kindergarten through senior year. That's 14,040 school hours. 14,040 school hours divided by 105,120 waking hours means that 13.36% of waking hours are spent in school by 18. 13.36% of waking hours are spent at school. Where's the rest of that time spent? Oh, it's up to you, Mom and Dad. That's up to you. 86.64% of their time is up to you. Now, that 13% is very important. Make sure you use it well. How is it that the public school system, which is darn right demonic in some ways, can turn out some great Christian kids? I think their parents are pretty concerned with that other 86.64%. Oh, I make sure my kid goes to Sunday school every week, and then when they're too old for Sunday school, they go for youth group. That is 1 hour a week. It's 1 hour. 1 hour a week. Less than 1% at church. You can't drop your kid off at church or even bring your kid to church and expect that they're going to receive Hanak at church, that they are going to be taught to long for the things of God and what it means to surrender to God. You cannot expect it. Now, it happens. It happens. I mean, I have examples of high school kids, juniors and seniors, that start coming and hanging around youth group and find Christ and surrender themselves, and life is radically different for them. I have examples. It happens. God can save anyone. But Mom and Dad, do you really want to risk your child's eternal future as well as their lifetime happiness on 1% of their time being at church? I mean, you're already losing 13% to school. Do you want to lose another 13% to all the activities that they must do to get a good college scholarship? Or whatever it is? Train them, lead them, coax them, guide them, force them. I told you guys the story about the guy at testimony night that was a really valuable church member. He's in his 90s, maybe 80s. And he was like the rock-solid cornerstone member of that church for years. I mean, this was a guy who never raised his voice, who loved everybody, who gave generously, who accepted anybody regardless of how bad they came in off of the street. I mean, this was the guy that everybody exemplified themselves after. He had been a Christian so long, everybody was pretty sure he introduced Jesus to the faith. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is the guy, right? He stood up in testimony night one night, and he said, "When I was a child, I had a drug problem." And everybody in church went, "Oh." And he says, "My mama drugged me to church every week. And when she wasn't there, my grandma drugged me to church every week. And that's why I turned out like I did." That's it. To knock. Give them a deep desire for the things of God. And then when they go off into the world, and they will, and they start discovering the things of the world, and some of them will turn away from the things of church. Some of them will even turn away from the things of God, but they'll remember that taste. And when they get thirsty, they'll long for it. And they'll come back around. That's what it says. That's what it says. Jacob did not do this. Jacob did not do this. And so he said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me, making me odious to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. We are few in number. If they unite against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. The only thing in the world Jacob cares about is me." He doesn't care about Dinah. He doesn't care about all these innocent people that were just slaughtered, all these women and children that were taken into slavery. He doesn't care about any of that. He only cares about me. And yet somehow, Genesis 35, verse 1. Listen, it blows my mind. If you are God, what are you going to say to Jacob right now? Here's what I think I would do. Little Joseph, he's about 6 years old. He has a real heart for the things of God. You know those kids that love coming to Sunday school and they know all the answers already? And they're little and that they're glued during the sermon. You know those kids. They just love singing the praise songs, and you can tell that this is a kid who has a heart for God. You know those kids. They don't come along very often, but we see them from time to time. That's little Joseph. I think if I'm God at this point, I ain't saying nothing to Jacob anymore. I'm done with Jacob. I already told him, listen, if he wants to come and worship, great, he is welcome. I'm setting my sights on Joseph. I'm starting to, at 6 years old, remember little boy Samuel? He did it for Samuel. I'm starting to talk to Joseph. Joseph, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac, would have liked to have been the God of Jacob. I am the God of your forefathers, and I've got a promise for you, little Joseph. Walk with me, little Joseph, all your life. That's what I'm doing. I'm done with Jacob. And listen, be honest with me. You're done with Jacob too, aren't you? Enough of this guy. But that's not our God. Some people say God is the God of second chances. I disagree entirely. He is the God of 4,326 chances. And if you need a 4,327th, well, he's the God of that chance too. And he goes to Jacob. He doesn't even say, are you done yet, Jacob? That's what I would have done. Jacob, have you had enough of this? Are you ready to finally surrender, Jacob? No, he doesn't. He says, get up. Go to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. We're going to talk specifically about this concept on Sunday of get up and go. We're going to talk about this. I find it interesting that when God calls him, he is so specific that there is no way that Jacob can miss it this time. I told you last time, go to your home, your father's family, the place you were born, and yet somehow you decided close enough. Let's be specific now. Remember Bethel, Jacob? Remember, you gave it that name, Jacob. Remember the whole staircase thing, Jacob, and the angels and the ascending it. Remember how I stood there and talked to you? Remember the stone and the oil? Remember that, Jacob? Go to that place, Jacob. Go there. The place where I met you when you were running with your tail between the legs. Go there. Oh, okay. I'll go there. Now, listen to verse 2 of chapter 35. So Jacob said to his family and all who were with him, get rid of the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, and change your clothes. Wait a minute. Foreign gods? Okay, listen, I remember that Rachel had stolen the teraphim from her father. Is he just talking about teraphim? No. The impression that's given here is that many of the family members, many of them, have picked up foreign gods. They have decided that they serve these idols. Oh, Jacob's God is God Most High. Well, my God is chunk o' wood or whatever. They have decided, okay, and Jacob knows it. He knows it. Could that be the problem with Simeon and Levi? Could that be why chapter 34 is a godless chapter? Because the sons of Jacob, when Dinah was defiled, the sons of Jacob did not have Yahweh God to go to. They didn't know him. Their own gods are gods of violence and war and retribution, not gods of grace and forgiveness and, hey, let's fix this problem. Could it be? Where'd they get them from, these gods? Think they just carved them out themselves? Doubt it. Where'd they get them from? I have some thoughts of where they might have gotten them. They might have gotten them from the Canaanites. They might have gotten them from the other peoples groups that they encountered as they traveled from Paddan Aram down through what's modern-day Jordan and on into the Promised Land. They might have gotten them there. They might have met with some other Bedouin people who were nomads there. And, oh, what God do you worship? Oh, I worship Chunko Wood. Oh, I'd like to worship Chunko Wood too. Oh, he's a violent God. He calls for retribution. Hey, retribution's fun. I'm down with that. Let me buy him from you. And Jacob knew it. Jacob, who had been called by God to be entirely surrendered to him, knew that his family was doing this and did not yet stop them. He was so passive. Oh, we talked about this some on Sunday. Pay attention to what your kids are watching on YouTube and stop them if it's unacceptable. Or whatever it might be. But finally, he says, finally, Jacob gets the picture. Have we screwed it up enough? Have we made a big enough hash of it? Get rid of the foreign gods. We're going to serve Yahweh God. Purify yourselves and change your clothes. You are covered in the things of the world. Remove those things to be Hebrews once again. We must get up and go to Bethel. I will build an altar there to the God who answered me in my day of distress. He has been with me everywhere I have gone. Why does he bring this up? Because this is currently a day of distress for him. This is a big day of distress for him because the Canaanites and Perizzites see what happened to Shechem, and they are required by the cultural rules of that day to respond. Some of their people have been executed. They are required to go to war to receive back the slaves that they have stolen. That's how it works. Jacob is in a day of distress. God's rescued me from every other day of distress. Let's go to God in our day of distress. Aren't you thankful for days of distress? I always feel like a chump when things go wrong and I'm like, oh God, I have really screwed up. Thank you for letting me come back to you again. Is it possible that some of those days of distress are allowed to us so that we will come back? I think there might be a whole sermon in there. We're almost out of time, and I want to end it with these. So they gave to Jacob all their foreign gods and all their earrings that had been used in worship. And Jacob buried them under the oak near Shechem. He buried them under the tree. Are you seeing something there? There is some symbolism to note. When we're talking about, we're going to see a tree again here pretty quick. When we're talking about the tree in the Old Testament, we are generally referring to the cross of Christ. Jacob took the unholy things and needed to get rid of them. And so he put them at the feet of Jesus. He said, we need to be cleansed. Let's bury our sin at the feet of Jesus. Oh, there's so much to say on that. So much to say on that. But know that if you are trapped in any kind of sin that's got you and you can't get away, you can bury it at the feet of Jesus. At the feet of Jesus is forgiveness for sin and power over sin. We're going to have to stop there. And we're going to come back next week and we're going to finish the story of Jacob finally. We're actually going to see Jacob do some good things. We're going to see a lot of heartbreak in his life. And we're going to touch a little bit on what happened with Esau. And then, finally, we get to a great story. For the first time in the history of our studies together in the Bible since I got to Alaska, we are going to see a story of great victory and hope. We're going to see a story of godly people doing godly things and God working through them. And I am excited to get to the life of Joseph. Let's stop tonight and pray. Thank you, Lord, that you have gotten us here. We thank you that you have been teaching us so many lessons, and we pray, oh God, that you will continue and that we will rest in you.